All that's increased is the paper values of our stocks and real estate. But that's not real wealth, no more than the NASDAQ was wealth. When you see the stock market come down and the real estate bubble burst, all that phony wealth is going to evaporate. And all that's going to be left is all the debt that we accumulated to foreigners.
Peter, I'm going to take a bet with you on this one. I'll bet you a penny on this one that if you'll sign a letter saying that if you're wrong, you'll sign a letter that you were wrong to me in this, but you're just way off base. There is nothing out there that tells us we're going to have a nice slowdown, but it's not going to be a crash.
Let me ask you this.
You've just been watching a clip that's making the rounds on YouTube featuring my guest today, Peter Schiff. He's president of Euro Pacific Capital. Back in 2006, having a friendly debate with Art Laffer, the famous Reagan economist. So did he ever pay you that penny? Did you get the note saying I was wrong and you were right?
Never got the penny, never got the note. In fact, on Bill Maher, he was asked about that, and he basically claimed that he doesn't think he lost because the statute of limitations on economic forecasts is 9 months.
Wow. Well, 2+ years ago, if not longer, you were out there, one of the few voices out there saying the U.S. economy is headed over a cliff. First of all, do you feel vindicated at this point?
Well, I don't know if I'm completely vindicated yet because 100% of my forecasts haven't panned out. There's still a few major predictions that I've made that haven't come true yet, but I believe that they will.
So which ones? What are those major forecasts that are still out there?
Well, I had predicted a major decline in the dollar, which was underway up until recently, and we've had a rally in the dollar. I think this rally will be short-lived, and I still believe the dollar will collapse, particularly as a result of all the policies that we're pursuing now, the stimulus and the bailouts. I also predicted that commodity prices would rise, including gold. That had happened up until recently, but again, I assume that this is a short-term correction in that ongoing bull market, and I expect new highs in commodity prices over the next few years.
All right, so we're going to look at some of the other clips from this video on YouTube called Peter Schiff Was Right, which you didn't put up, but there's a lot of instances here where you were right and the other guys were wrong. Yeah. Let's have a listen.
Most of the profits that people have in real estate are going to vanish, just like the profits in the dot-coms in 1999, 2000. It's a fantasy. People can't sell their house. The inventories are exploding all over the country. Houses are on the market for 6 months a year. There's no bidders. The prices are going to fall through the floor. You guys are deluding yourself.
We heard
it.
But subprime is tiny. Subprime is a tiny, tiny blip.
It's not tiny, and again, it's not just subprime. It's the entire mortgage market. Right?
All right. Well, Tracy, you're disagreeing.
You're simply wrong. Well, you're simply wrong about that.
No, I'm not.
So we just heard Ben Stein. Do you have any thoughts? He did apologize to you.
Yeah, you know, in fairness to Ben, he wrote a piece in the New York Times in which he apologized and admitted that I was right on that and he was wrong and that he wished he had listened to me. So that I appreciated that.
Not to dwell too much on history, but what did you see that other people didn't see?
Well, I just think I understood the economics better. I mean, people were looking at consumption and thinking that was legitimate economic growth. They looked at our GDP that was rising, but it was simply because Americans were using their credit cards and taking out home equity loans and spending the money. And while everybody was looking at our asset values, they looked at home prices and real estate prices and said, well, we can handle the debt because we're really getting wealthier.
That's what Arlaffer talked about in that first clip, right?
I knew that was phony. I knew that eventually we were going to have to pay the interest on this debt, and I knew a lot of Americans were using adjustable rate mortgages. I know the government is financing all the debt with Treasury bills. I know eventually interest rates would rise, and that these interest payments would be an increasing burden on the economy, and eventually when those asset bubbles burst, we'd just be broke.
Okay, so where in your estimation are we in the cycle? Because obviously, you know, coming into Friday, the S&P at its lowest level since 1997. Yeah. Financial Armageddon, Citigroup trading under $5 a share.
Yeah, I mean, the financial crisis is well underway. I mean, I don't know how much left there is. I think there's still a lot more damage to come. But I think the economic crisis is only just beginning. There's a lot more pain. And the problem is what's happening right now in the economy, this is not the problem. This is the consequence. The problem was those years of reckless spending that Art Laffer thought was so great. That's when we were digging ourselves into this hole. We were borrowing trillions of dollars from the world. We blew all the money on consumption, and now we can't pay the bills. Meanwhile, we allowed the manufacturing sector of our economy to disintegrate while we pretended we had a viable service sector to replace it. So we have to have a very painful transition. We're going to have a much lower standard of living for many, many years as we have to deal with the consequences of our reckless reckless behavior. And I think the instigator of all that was the government itself. It was the reckless monetary policies of the Federal Reserve, principally Alan Greenspan, but now he's handed that baton to Bernanke, and also a government that constantly interfered in the free market, produced moral hazards, rewarded reckless speculation, and punished thrift and savings.
Right, so I'm not going to laugh at you because you're talking about very serious stuff, and you've been right up until this point, but what is the risk to your scenario, the things that maybe, where you're proven wrong, where things could go better than you would expect?
I don't think there's a risk of things getting better. I don't think we have to worry about that. I mean, the only thing that could happen that would delay this would be if the rest of the world, the Chinese and the Japanese and the Saudis, decide that they're going to lend us the trillions of dollars that we need to borrow to try to paper this thing over. And if they do that, then we're simply going to postpone the collapse to a later date, but it'll be much worse.
All right, Peter, thanks very much.
Thanks.